Get ahead of thinning hair with Nutrafol's whole-body approach to hair growth. No drugs, no compromises. As the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, Nutrafol's natural medical-grade ingredients are clinically shown to improve hair growth, thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Plus, they offer free shipping on every order. To get $15 off your first month subscription, visit Nutrafol.com/men and use the promo code ROOTS. That's NUTRAFOL.com/men, promo code ROOTS.
Hello and welcome to episode number 3 of the Peer Project podcast. My name is Chris Duke. First of all, thank you so much for joining us again for the 3rd instalment of the Peer Project. And thank you for listening and giving us all sorts of great feedback for the first 2 episodes. One with Joel and Naughty and then Keith Walsh last week. Remember, be vulnerable. That was the message from Keith last week. If you haven't heard them, please go back and listen. There are some amazing mental health journeys and some amazing mental health stories. Now, a bit of a change this week than what I said was going to be. So we are still going to have a wrestling referee, Aubrey Edwards, on the show. She's going to be on next week's podcast because I thought to myself, I can't host a podcast about everybody's mental health journeys without telling you about my own mental health journey. And I can't be a special guest on my own podcast, but what I can do is enlist the help of a special guest host. Daytime and morning TV queen Lorraine Kelly is the guest host for the Peer Project podcast today, and she's going to be interviewing me about my mental health journey. So here she is, Lorraine Kelly, hosting the Peer Project podcast, episode 3.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Lorraine, and today I am so glad to be talking to Chris Duke. Now, Chris is a best-selling author, also a bit of a campaigner as well. I think that's fair to say, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, well, you can say that.
Yeah, I think so. And we're going to be talking about something that I think that has affected just about all of us, really. And certainly during the past couple of years, I think we've all felt a bit overwhelmed, anxious, all of these things. And I think what's great and what's positive is that people are actually talking about their problems with mental health and how they're dealing with it and how they're coping. And I was really interested to read your book because we actually come from quite similar backgrounds. And if I can take you back to when you were a kid, if you can just tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up, what your home life was like, and how, that's obviously all of our childhood impacts on our lives. But what was it like for you?
Well, growing up in the East End of Glasgow is, the East End of Glasgow is kind of known as a quote unquote rough area. Something that I had never experienced because I'd always got the sense of community from Cranhill rather than the rough side of things, and I really, really loved that. But we lived in a kind of 2-bedroom flat in the East End of Glasgow. Went to Catholic school. Just brought a pretty normal life. My parents worked hard for us, for me and my sister, and that kind of rubbed off on me later on in my life. But it's funny because a lot of people say to me that because of the issues that I had as I was getting older, they would have assumed that I had a pretty rough childhood, but I didn't. We were well looked after. My parents worked hard. I went to a decent school. It was okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk like that because I was born first of all in the Gorbals and then Bridgeton. And my mum and dad were the same. They worked really, really hard. They looked after us, me and my wee brother. And sounds very, very similar, actually. And instilled that sort of work ethic as well. And there was kind of that, I don't know if you found it, but there was kind of that pressure. I don't know whether pressure is the right thing to say, but that thing of you had to work hard, and you had to work really hard at school. And you had to be, it's almost like you had to be, your parents were giving you the opportunity for you to be better. there was that going on. Did you feel that sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, it was always instilled in us to work hard and try our absolute best to make the best life for ourselves. But there wasn't really that much pressure in terms of that. I did well at school. I was quite I don't know. I was a bit of a swot in the class, really, which is probably why I was bullied.
I think we're similar. We're far too similar. Yeah, because I was a sport. I used to get bullied for being a sport. Did you find that a little bit? You would get a little bit of that. It was quite hard. Sometimes I wouldn't put my hand up to give the answer because I didn't want everybody to think that was the teacher's pet.
I remember I was in primary 3 and I got sent up to the primary 7 class to drop something off to the teacher, and they were in the middle of a spelling competition or a spelling thing or whatever, and the teacher, when I walked in, the teacher was livid because the primary 7 pupils couldn't spell the word juice, and I walked in at this exact time and they says, right, Chris, you tell me, how do you spell juice? And I was like, J, A, E, curly K, E. And then the teacher, Mr. Crowley, his name was, went mental at this primary 7 class. Like, see, even this primary 3 can spell juice.
But you were a child prodigy, so you were all right. You were fine.
Well,
what were you like as a kid growing up?
Oh, I was a performer, and even now I still love that, because I think the first time you and I met was when I was in a show in Alyth.
God, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's how we met.
Right. Very well. Gosh, now that's going back. How long ago would that be now?
About 15 years ago.
No, it can't be. Oh,
it
my
was.
Goodness, that's terrifying. So that was the way. Did you find that as a sort of, not, because it's an old cliche that people say, you go on stage, it's like an escape. It's like you want to, you want to get into your own, a different world to the world that you're in. Was that a wee bit like that, or how was it for you? How did you get into that sort of area?
I think I'm a people pleaser, and I like people to like me. So when I'm performing, whether I was a kid or even as an adult, I always had to try and do the best job. So the people watching me, I could see the smiles on their faces. I could see, even if I was just performing for my mum and dad in the house, if they were happy, it was making me happy. And even now, like a few years ago, I hosted the Ollie Murs concert in Dundee. Like I was the host. I was on stage in front of 10,000 people, and it's one of the highlights of my life.
Amazing.
Doing that, and again, it's just having all these people look back at me and smile and enjoy what I'm putting out there. Even as a kid, just if people were happy, I was happy.
Yeah, I get that. I completely get that. And what did you want to be when you were at school? What did you have this thing like, I wanted to be an astronaut? What did you want to be?
Well, it's so funny because when I used to do my talks in primary schools, when I did my Lucy's Blue Day stuff, I always told, and I said there was 4 things I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to be a radio DJ, and I wanted to be a wrestler. It's 4 things.
Oh, okay.
4 things that I wanted to be when I grew up. Now, obviously, I'm a dad and I'm a best-selling author. So I managed to get 2. I did have a good stint on the breakfast show at Wave 102 in Dundee for a while.
Excellent.
So that's 3. And the next part of this actually is I'll tell this story slightly different to you because you are somewhat indirectly involved in this. So a few years ago, you had Davina McCall on your show, talking about her show this time next year.
Oh, yes.
Where people come on and they pledge to do something, massive to change their life within a year. And she was talking about all the big stories, like lose a whole load of weight or reunite with old friends, things like that. And then she said, almost sarcastically, she said, There's even a guy on this who wants to be a wrestler, and you've both had, a big laugh about that. That was me.
That was you.
That was me.
That was you. Oh, for goodness sake. How bizarre. How bizarre is that? It's a small world. But tell you what, 3 out of 4 is no bad, is it, when you think about it?
Yeah, well, I got all 4. I got all 4. I had my wrestling match as well. Yeah.
Of course. So, yeah, so 4 out of 4, I should say. 4 out of 4 is not bad, because I be an astronaut. I never got to be an astronaut, and you have got all of those, which is it's just great. It really is. It's brilliant. When did you have, the idea for the book, Lucy's Blue Day, that was before COVID and before all of that. Mm-hmm. But it felt as if you almost kind of knew what was coming, if you know what I mean, because that book obviously right now is even more invaluable than it was when you first wrote it and you first had the idea. Mm-hmm. Especially young people, because that. And I just wondered where you got that idea from. What did you, when you were looking around and when you were seeing what was going on in the world, and when you thought, I've got to really do something here? Because it's all very well if you think they've got to do something, but you did. You absolutely did. You went and did something.
So it's actually a weird story in a sense, because the book was never intended to go public, and never ever intended to make it public. And I was sitting one day, I was putting my eldest to bed. She was 8 at the time. And she was having a wee chat. She was chatting away, and she says to me, Daddy, do you ever not like being you? And I says, and I was like, I completely understand what you were feeling, because when I was her age, I felt like that. And I felt
that's amazing.
I didn't like being me. And I wanted to be somebody else, and and that feeling led to all my problems later on in my life.
Yeah,
and I wanted to nip that in the bud right away. And I was like, I need to do something about this. So she eventually went to sleep, and I'm sitting on the bottom of my bed, and I pull out my phone, and I open up the notes app, and I just start writing this poem about a little girl whose hair changes colour when her emotions change. And it sat for about 6 months, and then I read it to my wife, and she was like, that's amazing, you should turn that into a book. And I was like, nah, nobody will want that. So anyway, I went on Facebook, and I was like, does anybody know any illustrators who might want to put this together? And I got recommended to Federica, who drew the pictures for the book. And but being a professional illustrator, she wasn't cheap, so
right, I
had to crowdfund, and that's when I went public with it. Because I said, if you donate a tenner, I'll get to pay the illustrator, and I'll give you a copy of the book when it comes out. That's how it was going to work. And we did quite well. I raised just about $1,500. You actually promoted that as well, that fundraiser on Twitter.
Such a great idea.
And then so I'd raised about £1,500, about £500 short. And I got a message from my friend, Leslie, who had, and you won't believe this, right? This is like the most ridiculous part of this story. About a month prior to her texting me, she had won the lottery. Like, not even just the lottery. Not even just like, you may even think 5 numbers, a couple of £100,000. No. She won the Euro Millions, and she won £58 million.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So she texts me, and she's like, Chris, I've heard about your book. I love what you're doing. I want to help you take it further. And she ended up paying in total, I think, about $15,000 to pay for the illustrator, to pay for the first run of 5,000 books. She paid for the initial run of Lucy's Blue Day dolls. So she really, really supported it. And that's how it kind of just skyrocketed, and it just went mental after that.
That's incredible. What a brilliant, brilliant story. But all from your little girl saying that one thing. When she said that to you, it was really interesting what you said then, because you said it sort of took you back to how you felt when you were growing up, and how did you deal with all of those feelings? Because there wasn't a Lucy's Blue Day, you know, there wasn't any of that for you. So how did that sort of manifest itself? So I'm interested in that journey that you had.
I didn't deal with it. That's why I wanted Alyssa to deal with it, because I kept it in. I was brought up in an age where you weren't allowed to talk about your feelings. You know, it wasn't. Yeah, especially boys. Yeah. You know, you didn't talk about your feelings. If you felt like you were going to cry, it'd be like, you know, only girls cry. You know, all that sort of rubbish. And I should say this because anytime I'm interviewed about this, I always say, you know, like my dad is amazing. You know, he's and even like now, he's a fantastic dad. He's a fantastic granddad. It was just a different time. And
absolutely,
and I wasn't encouraged to talk about my feelings. Nowadays I am, and even now, even my dad's more open about his feelings. But back then it was different. So the biggest way it manifested itself was after my gran passed away, and that was like really sudden because we were really close to my gran, and it was really unexpected. And it was maybe a couple of weeks later that I started self-harming. But it wasn't, you know, and I want to say your typical self-harm because that's not the right thing to say, but it wasn't like I didn't do my arms, or it wasn't hidden. Like it was my forehead that I was harming. So if I was cutting myself in the forehead, my blood would be dripping down my face. And I could see that in the mirror. And for some reason that was a release for me. And obviously looking back, it was stupid. It was a stupid thing to do. But that's how it manifested itself for me.
Yeah, and you were in a really bad place, and something has to give, doesn't it? If you're not able to talk about it, whether it's, you know, because of the time that it was, or you just don't feel that you can't just bottle that up. It has to come out in some way. You know, you can understand that happening. But when did you think to yourself, I really need to get help here? I'm just wondering how you know, what age you would have been and what was going on in your life at that point, and what other people were saying to you when that was happening. Or did you do it all in private, or what, how you know, I just wonder about other people's reactions.
So my parents were naturally really worried because I obviously I wasn't hiding the fact that I was self-harming. Because it was, you know, it was right on my forehead. You could see it. But being a typical teenager, I just thought that my parents were stupid, and I told them that I fell over and hit my head. But they knew, because it wasn't just one cut; it was like loads of wee cuts. So it wasn't. I couldn't just fall and hit my head and have loads of wee cuts all over my face. And they told me that when I was older. Like, they said, Chris, we weren't stupid. We knew exactly what you were doing. And rather than talk to me directly about it, they spoke to the school, because I was really close to my music teacher. My music teacher, Mr. McLean. We were like that whole class. We were just a really close knit class. You know, it was one of those things where I was allowed to call him by his first name. You know, that sort of stuff. And so they phoned the school and spoke to him and asked him to speak to me. And I can't remember the whole conversation. I just remember the one part of him asking if I'd gotten somebody pregnant. Is that why I was lashing out? Because I was a 16-year-old boy. Apparently, that's what I do. But after that, I kind of realised that, you know, people were worried about me, and I was opening up a wee bit more, more so to my friends than anybody else. But it all kind of buried down a lot, and I kept it all buried because I'm kind of jumping back and forward here. But I realized a few years ago that I am a massive self-saboteur, and everything that went good in my life, I would sabotage it somehow, and I think deep down, I thought to myself that I didn't deserve that success. You know, so when I left school, I went to university. I lasted about 9 months in university. There was some self-harming in university as well, unfortunately. I started drinking, and I just dropped out. I just dropped out of uni completely. Any job that I had, a couple of months in, I would sabotage it and, just not show up. And then I would tell my parents that I got sacked for no reason. And again, it's me thinking my parents were stupid. And that went on and on. And even like romantic relationships as well, I would sabotage in a way. Well, I'm sure you can imagine how I would sabotage them. I don't need to say it out loud, but I'd end up maybe cheating on somebody, or one example is my girlfriend, my longest term girlfriend that I had before I met my now wife was a girl called Laura. And I don't mind naming her because she's named in the book anyway. And she knows that she's spoken about. Yeah. I pretty much forced her to cheat on me through my own insecurities. So when she would go out on a night out with her friends, and I would phone her the next day, and I would always ask her the same 4 questions. I was like, "Did you have a good time? Yeah. Did you get drunk? Yeah or no? Did you get home okay? Yeah. Did you cheat on me?" And the answer was always no. And that was it, right? Mm. Every single time she went out, I did this. And then the one day I was at college and I was on the phone. It was a payphone. That's how long ago it was. I was on the payphone and I was like, "Did you have a good time? Did you cheat on me?" And the answer was yes. And my heart just sank. And that was it. So, and even that, I know that even though she did what she did, I know that was my fault. And I know that.
Did you feel it almost made her do that? But that was kind of like you pushing her away. Yeah. Wasn't it?
Yeah. 100%. Although I was heartbroken at the time, and I was, I think I genuinely, and this might sound like I'm being dramatic here, but I genuinely spent about 3 months in my bed. I was that depressed about it. And my mum asked my cousin to kind of look out for me because she was worried about what I was going to do. It was one of those ones.
Gosh, that is very serious.
Yeah.
Did you had thoughts like that in your life, that you've thought the world would be a better place without you in it? Although obviously it wouldn't, but have you ever thought like that?
Yeah. So I went for therapy about 2 years ago. And my therapist asked me that same question. And she had to define it. So she said, "Have you ever had suicidal thoughts?" And I was like, no, never had suicidal thoughts. No, oh God, no. And then she explained to me that suicidal thoughts isn't just, considering doing it, or even getting to the stage of considering doing it. It's, even just thinking about what would it be like if I wasn't here is technically a suicidal thought. And that opened up a lot of things for me as well, because I have thought like that. I've thought like that quite often. But to be honest with you, I don't think I would ever be able to do it because I'm too nosy. You know what I mean? Having the whole world exist without me. No, we can't have that. No, I'm too nosy to know what's going on in the world. Plus, obviously, nowadays, my life's so much better. I've got the children, I've got my wife, I've got all that. It's but back then, I can only look in hindsight and say that if things had gotten really bad, there may have been a time or two that I might have considered it. And there was maybe 1 or 2 times where I was walking across not the Kingston Bridge. It was the one next to that, because you can't walk across the Kingston Bridge. It's the one before that. There's been a time or two where I was walking across that, and the thought had crossed my mind, but it had never gotten to a stage where I was maybe climbing or anything like that. But it had crossed my mind.
But it had been there. But luckily, not taking any action on that. what sort of, I mean, you said you dropped out of uni, you had this self-saboteur inside you that an awful lot of us have, we do, to a lesser or greater degree. But that obviously affected your life massively. How on earth do you break that habit? What saved you from that? Or is it still there inside sometimes?
So there is one, and it sounds really, really simple when I say it like this, but it was my dad. So you're talking years later. So I got hit really, really bad with postnatal depression when my eldest was born, which is it's meant to...
Nobody talks about this.
No.
Nobody talks about the fact that men do suffer as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, even to this day, it's one of the last taboos, isn't it? People just don't talk about it. I'm so glad that you have talked about this. You talk about it, but you.
So so I got hit really bad with this, and you say that like people think it's unusual in men. It's not. It's just unusual for men to talk about it. That's what it is. So I got hit really badly with this postnatal depression. My eldest Alyssa was born, and I was expecting this massive rush of love that you're told that you get when you have your kids, and I didn't get it. It just didn't come. And harking back to what I'd said about my parents before, my parents worked really, really hard for us, and my dad was the breadwinner. And at that point, I was a sales guy in Curry's. I was selling computers, and I wasn't even doing very well at that. So, and like we didn't have a secure home at the time. We were living in my father-in-law's house. He was technically renting it to us, but he never charged us any rent. There was nothing secure about the life that I thought that I was given for my kid.
Right. Understand.
Compared to what my dad did for us. Because, and that's what I felt a dad should be, was this strong man provider,
Provide.
And I wasn't that. I wasn't bringing in the money. I wasn't this big strong man. As I mentioned before, I'm a performer. I love musicals. It's not your typical manly thing. So I felt a failure as a dad because I didn't have this rush of love. I wasn't a big manly man, and I wasn't bringing in enough money to cover the bills. And when the midwife or the health visitor comes in not long after the child's born and has this interview with the mum, and basically the postnatal depression interview, how does your days look? How do you find jokes funny? Things like that. And every time my wife answered no to the question, I was on the other side of the room, silently answering yes, and in my head. And then, so this all kind of manifested itself again, and it's again back to self-sabotage. So I'd mentioned before, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't. We were struggling, but I always found a way to try and get the latest stuff. A big telly, the new iPad, all this sort of stuff, and that was my way of sabotaging what we had. Unfortunately, I would get this stuff and I wouldn't pay for it. So then people would come to the door, and and I was out, and then my wife would answer the door, and she didn't know anything about it. And there was one particular day where she'd got really, really embarrassed about what happened, and she didn't go to her own family about it. She went to my mum, because she knew that my mum would tell her the truth. And my mum point blank said to her, "Just leave him. Just go. He doesn't deserve you. Just honestly." And that's because of all this stuff that was happening. And my dad was there as well. And I'd finished work at the day, and she'd come and pick me up, and I knew that she was angry at me. And we went back to my parents' house, and my wife and the kids and my mum went out and just left me with my dad. And as I said before, my dad is not very open on talking about his feelings and things like that. And all he said to me was, if I lose those girls because of you, I will never forgive you. Talking about my kids.
Of course.
And that was the wake up call.
Really? It was that's so interesting. Do you, I mean, that's quite tough love, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That is tough when he's saying that to you, you cannot do this because this will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so interesting. And then did something just click? Or how did that? It's very interesting that it just took that from your dad.
Yeah. Oh, shut up. So as I said, like, my dad's no one for speaking. And when he said that, like, he said that I will never forgive you, I know that he meant that.
Right.
And if my wife had gone and taken the girls with her and he had lost those girls, I know for a fact that he would never have forgiven me for that. And that scared me, because normally he would just sit quietly and just stew over things. You know, when my granny died, he didn't speak up about it, but he did cry at the funeral, and that's the first time I ever seen him cry. So when he said that, it just really, really hit home that I could lose everything. Not only could I lose my kids, my wife, but my parents as well.
Everything. Your whole support system is just gone. And something takes that reality. And did things change immediately, or did it take a little while? How did things happen then?
Well, obviously, it wasn't a case of like the next day, all of a sudden, I had loads of money and a great job and a house. It did take time to build, but I had a new.
You changed, didn't you?
Yeah, so I had a motivation now.
Gotcha.
And it did start to build, and I started. So I still had this job. Oh no, I wasn't, because I was signed off my job at Curry's for depression. Ironically enough, but eventually I ended up leaving that job completely, and it was at that point I decided to start chasing my dreams. And so I started working at community radio. Community radio. That's the one that you do for free, isn't it? Yeah, community radio. So I started volunteering at the community radio station, and built up a nice wee audience doing that. And it was at that point. I think you and I had met at this point, and this is that you get meeting you, and this might sound really corny, right? But meeting you was a kind of turning point as well, because the story of how this came about, and I don't even know if you know this story, right? But so you and I had met in Alyth, and we were backstage, and you were talking to a whole bunch of other people, and I was kind of relatively shy and into myself at the time. And then you stopped talking and you looked right at me and you went, "Here, you can sing, by the way." Like, just that's all you said. And it really boosted my confidence, and I was like, "Oh my God, Lorraine Kelly thinks that I can sing. This is amazing." So it was about a week later, I emailed your manager just to say, "Can you pass a message on to Lorraine, just to say thank you for coming to the show, and thank you for this and that next thing." And I'd signed off the email, and my phone number was on the bottom of the email. And then you made the biggest mistake of your life by texting me.
Hey there, listener. Do you have something to say? Then you're already a podcaster. You just don't know it yet. Whether you love to shoot the breeze with friends, have an urge to share your passions with the world, or even want to grow your business, you've got something worth saying with a podcast. With Acast, it couldn't be easier to start your own show. Launch, grow, and make money from your podcast across all listening platforms. If you have something to say, you're a podcaster. Head over to acast.com to get started for free.
And saying, "Oh no, it was lovely to meet you. What's your address? I'm going to send you some GMTV swag." and
Stream TV.
and it was that moment where I realized, I can actually make stuff happen and make stuff and make some massive things happen. So at that moment, I saved your phone number, and that's as you know now, anytime my name pops up in your phone, I guarantee you're like, oh Christ, what does he want now?
Not at all. But you're right. Sometimes it's take one wee thing. And what happened after that? What kind of things did you do? Because I know you were doing the radio.
Yeah, so I did. I was doing community radio, and I'm a massive wrestling fan, right? So I managed to talk them into letting me have a wrestling radio show where we talk about the stuff, all the wrestling stuff that happened, right? And I'd interviewed this wrestling manager. His name's Eric Bischoff. His name is, and I'd interviewed him, and it went really, really well. And so much so that Eric he tweeted, I've never had such a professional interview in all my life. This is so great. And I knew that Eric Bischoff was close to Hulk Hogan. Like they were friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, right, I could make something of this here. And I emailed Eric and I was like, listen, I know that you're friends with Hulk Hogan, and I know that you really enjoyed your interview with me. Do you think Hulk might be interested in talking to us? He emailed me back saying, leave it with me. And that was that. I thought, right, that's the last I'll hear of it. 2 days later, I got an email back saying, Terry, which is his real name, Terry is really interested to talk. Here's his phone number.
Wow.
And I was like, holy, the biggest wrestler of all time.
Oh, really? Of course.
Yeah.
Huge star.
You've interviewed him before.
I know it. Joy.
I remember it.
Yes.
Great. Because it's on YouTube, your interview with him. And I always remember it was like, I made a wee comment at the bottom of the YouTube video. I was like, why is Lorraine Kelly flirting with Hulk Hogan? That's...
Well, why not?
That's true. So we interviewed him the next week, and all of a sudden these community radio station numbers just shot up through the roof. And I thought, right, I'm making things happen here. And it's going well. So a new sports radio station was launching in Glasgow at the time. And I thought, oh, why not? I'll send in my demo and see what happens. And I ended up getting the mid-morning slot for that show, and that was my first ever paid radio gig. So at this point in my life, I had this one goal in my life in terms of radio, and that was to get onto Wave 102, which might not seem like a huge goal for a lot of people, because it's particularly radio, because it's local radio. It's not like a big like TFM or Bauer, or it's not a huge thing like that. But for some reason, I always wanted to work at Wave 102 because it was
local radio.
Yeah,
I used to listen to it. It's really good.
Yeah. So I literally phoned that radio station every single day for a year before they even thought about letting me through the door. And I ended up having to cover for somebody for a fortnight. And that's the kind of first thing that they did. They put me in, they got me into cover for Alistair for a fortnight. Had an amazing time doing that. I love telling stories. So I was telling all these silly stories about stupid things that had happened to me, like the fact that a seagull once stole my macaroni pie, and at the Overgate.
I love that. Those seagulls are deadly. Those seagulls.
They're
cheeky.
Really are. And then eventually the breakfast show came up, and I thought, right, I'm going to go and try for this. I'm going to go and get it. And lo and behold, got the breakfast show. Probably one of the best 3 years of my life doing the breakfast show, waking up Dundee every morning. And again, I was making things happen, rather than back before when I was intentionally not making things happen. I was doing the exact opposite now.
Yes.
So to give you an example of taking an opportunity and kind of making it bigger than what it is, I was given a chance to go to Glasgow to interview Mel C from the Spice Girls. And I was told by my program controller, just go down, interview her, just box standard interview. Having her name on the show will make it something that will bring some people in. I was all right, fine, fair enough. But I wanted to make content for my breakfast show.
Of course.
And I thought, how can I make this into something bigger than what it is? So I grabbed my daughter's ukulele and I learned how to play. I learned how to play Baby When You're Gone on the ukulele.
Brilliant.
So when I got down to Glasgow and we're sitting in the interview, to be honest with you, I shut out of it, right? And I thought, nah, I'm not going to do this. I just started interviewing her. And then she went, start poking out your bag. And I was like, okay, so it's a ukulele. I've learned to do this. And she's like, right, let's go. Let's do it then. and that's the story how I can say that I've managed to sing with a Spice Girl.
Fantastic. You see what happens?
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And how were you feeling at that time? How was your life going at that time? I mean, was all of a sudden everything was wonderful and that saboteur had been fully kicked out, or how were things?
So, and I'm sure you know this, and you might even still go through this, even though you've had such a massive career. Imposter syndrome. So,
yes,
I felt like I always felt like somebody's going to catch me out. Somebody's going to.
Yeah, you're going to get.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So somebody's going to realize that I don't belong here and boot me out. Which I think is why I always tried so hard to prove myself in there. So that's why I ended up singing with Mel C. That's why I ended up hosting the Ollie Murs concert. It was just, and because the Ollie Murs concert came purely by accident as well, because normally they get the local DJ from the big station to do it. So
right.
So Stuart Webster, who did the TFM breakfast show at the time, he was expecting the gig, and I think they were all expecting him to get the gig. And then I had Ollie on my show, and I think him and I just had a nice rapport. And at the end of the show, he asked me on air, well, do you want to do it?
Fantastic. Yeah. So that's, yeah.
What
are you going to say?
Yeah.
I was going to say yeah. Pretty much.
So, but I always had that wee niggle in the back of my mind that, I don't deserve this. I don't, but I kept fighting for it. But eventually what happened, that Wave 102 was sold to DC Thompson. They bought the license, but they didn't buy the presenters. And I was made redundant. I was actually, and this is how harsh it was actually, and I told this story on last week's podcast. So I was on air at the time, and they asked me to pre-record my last hour of the show so I could go in for this meeting. And that meeting was being told that the show that was going out as we spoke was my last show.
Oh, Chris, that's absolutely brutal.
It was heartbreaking.
That is brutal.
Yeah.
So that loving doing what you do. You're absolutely loving what you do. It's successful.
Mm-hmm.
Dear. And how did you deal with that though?
I didn't deal with it very well. So because at that point in my life, I'd uprooted the whole family. I'd moved us to Forfar, so right. I could work in Dundee. I was about 2 months away from major surgery and 3 months away from my third child being born. So
oh my goodness!
It wasn't a good
worst time.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's never good, right?
No.
But that really is.
But the old me would have went into this slump of, nobody likes me. I don't deserve this. I'm just going to sit and just mope about it. But literally, as I left the studio that day that I got made redundant, I was on my phone and I was emailing like every other station in the country, basically, to try and get another job.
Yeah.
I eventually got a job at BFBS in Edinburgh, So it's the Army radio.
Yeah, very good. Very, very.
It's a great station. Just unfortunately, the commute was a bugger because I lived in Forfar and I wasn't moving again.
No, that is a
so
lot.
So it took its toll. Eventually, I had to give that up, and I went back to my old career of catering, and I was a restaurant manager for a wee while, basically just to bring the money in. Of
course, you've got to do it. You're the provider again. Yeah, the provider.
Yeah. But this time I was enjoying it, and I felt like a provider. You know, I wasn't. And nothing against anybody who's got like an entry level job, but when you're in your mid-30s and you know you've got a family to look after, you know, going into an entry level job for me it just didn't sit right. It wasn't for me. So when I was a restaurant manager and you know I was a bit higher up, I was like, okay, I can do this. I feel better about myself. It was maybe more about the position than anything else. And it was in that job that I wrote Lucy's Blue Day.
Right. And to be honest, do you think if you had been doing the radio job, that demanding job, I mean, I know what it's like to get up early to do breakfast telly and you were doing breakfast radio, would you have had the time or the opportunity to do that, do you think? Do you think it was this sort of aligned and it all worked?
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Everything led me to everything that I'd been through, all the bad stuff that I'd went through led me to Lucy. And that's always what I say. So all the self-harm, the self-sabotage, the fact that I used to be when I went on this time next year show, I was 25 stone. And I dropped all the weight and you know it all led me to Lucy. So if I was still on the radio, no, Lucy wouldn't be here. And
so maybe it was the right thing to have happened. It doesn't feel like that, does it? But maybe it was. Maybe it was because you know you did this incredible book and that has helped so many people. So many people. I wondered about that, Chris, about the feedback that you got from the book and continue to get from that. So
the first kind of major feedback I got was it was from you actually. It said, you know, it was such a clever way to talk about mental health, and that's still on the website. It's got a picture of you, and it says such a clever way.
That's good.
Stephen Fry called it charming.
He did,
and
just love.
And just recently, Jason Manford actually posted about it, and he it was thanks to him it got to number one actually, because he posted about it, and within 4 hours the book was at number one. It was amazing.
That's fantastic. That's brilliant.
In terms of the children, there's a couple of stories that I like to tell. I say I like to tell. I mean, they're not really nice stories, but so about a week or two after the book came out, I got an email from a grandparent or a carer. It was a carer for this little boy, 8 years old, who had lost his mum the year prior. And he had gotten to a stage where he was deliberately trying to hurt himself so he could go to heaven and be with his mum.
Oh, God.
At 7 years old. You know, he turned 8 by the time the email had come around. So he'd been going through all this different therapy and nothing was working for him. And then they bought him Lucy's Blue Day as just part of his therapy, something else for him to read. And when I got the email said that they now read this story to him every single day, and he has not self-harmed once since he got the book.
Chris, that's brilliant.
Because he can talk about his feelings, and he can.
You gave him that opportunity with that story, which actually really resonated with him, as it does with children and adults. And That's an incredible thing. And that won't just have happened to him. You must have stories like that, so many stories like that, but also the ones that you will never hear. Do you know what I mean? You just know of the ones that people have got in touch with you, but there must be so many children and so many parents and grandparents and carers and all the rest of it who have used it, because that's the thing. You can read it as a story, but you can use it as a tool to spark those conversations, which are so important.
That kind of takes me back to the whole imposter syndrome thing as well. It's like, because I've got no qualifications. As I said, I dropped out of uni, I dropped out of college. I've got zero qualifications. And sometimes I'm thinking, what right do I have, making this change in people's life? Like, I mean, who am I to? Because there was another story that I got. I got a video message from WWE wrestler Kevin Owens, and he got a message or an email from a dad of one of the girls whose school that I'd went to visit, and had said that this little girl, and again, 8 years old, she was on suicide watch at the time. And I'd went to the school, I did my visit, I did the whole story about how when I was younger, I wanted to do 4 different things in my life, and I'd managed to achieve it all, and I'd read Lucy's Blue Day, and this little girl had got so inspired that it just completely turned her life around. And this dad had sent this message to Kevin Owens to get him to send me a message to thank me for saving his daughter's life.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it just...
That must mean so much.
It floored me, and it still does, to think that I'm just a normal guy just sitting here in my house in Forfar. That some little girl down in England is walking about and still here because of me. And I just can't get my head around that.
It is brilliant, though. And it's an amazing thing to have achieved. It really has. It's just been great, and it will continue. That's the thing about the book. It's timeless. The story is timeless. Like that the classic now, and can be read for the next generation. Your children can read it to their children. That's the thing about it. It will still resonate. It's like what I was saying at the very beginning of our conversation. It's needed now more than ever. Because our kids, I don't think we know the damage on our children's mental health at this point. I think it's only going to be in the next year that it's really, really going to start manifesting. It's what's happened to them during that whole time, and that's where they're really going to need that book.
And I was really scared when COVID first kind of came, as everybody was, about how it would affect things, because the only way that I could promote the book was to go and visit schools, and then I would go and visit schools, and people would buy the book, and I'd use that money to go and visit more schools, and then it was a nice cycle the way it was working. Yeah. So the school visits stopped, the book sales stopped.
Of course, yeah.
Which meant that again I couldn't provide for my family. But I dealt with it differently this time. That was it. I had to go on benefits for a while, but it didn't bother me. It was like, okay, I'm here. This is when I went into therapy, and my counsellor or my therapist, she's not going to go, right, okay, I've got rid of COVID, you can go back into schools now. That's not what their job is. Her job was to help me deal with the situation that I'm in now. Help me deal with my now. And, I can't change it. So how can I deal with it? And unfortunately, we had to close the Lucy's Blue Day as a business, and as a community interest company, because it was costing us too much to keep afloat. But as you say, the book's always going to be there. It's never going to go away, and that comforts me to know that even though I'm not actively out there and I'm not actively doing my assemblies and things like that, it still comforts me that the book's always going to be there, and it's always going to be helping people long after I'm away.
No, it will. I mean, it really will. And also maybe you will get that opportunity again, hopefully sooner rather than later, to do that vital work that you were doing, which is just, because there's nothing better than having the storyteller sit and telling the story, in a classroom. It's fine to do stuff online and Zooms and all the rest of it, but you physically present there talking and taking questions and all of that is just the best thing. This takes us on, I guess, to Big Boys Do Cry, and where that all came from. And was that a lockdown project? Was that when you thought, okay, I've always wanted to do this? Was writing that book something you always wanted to do, and now I've actually got the time, I can do it now?
Yeah, it was. It was actually kind of coming along the same lines as when I was doing my therapy, because I would write chapters in my book, and then I'd have my therapy session a couple of days later, and I'd be talking about what I was writing in the book. And it's funny because one of the things that I eventually realised after talking to the therapist whilst I was writing the book is that I never properly grieved my grand's death. Because I had to man up, so to speak. I didn't, and because it was so sudden, and I ended up, I had to play the organ. I played the organ at my grand's funeral, so I didn't really get to do the whole funeral thing either. And so that kind of opened my eyes a wee bit, and I eventually got to kind of, even 20 odd years later, grieve my grand passing. But the book itself, people always told me that I've got loads of interesting stories to tell, like the Mel C story, the Ollie Murs story, or I lived in Germany for a couple of years.
The wrestling.
Yeah, the wrestling, and I always told you should write a book. So I sat and I did it. And it was done in a way that I was sitting at this microphone, and I was talking to Microsoft Word, and I was talking it, and Microsoft Word was writing it, and then my wife would edit it, and we turned it into this book. And it's there to show people, because yes, okay, all these celebrity books where famous people have went through these hardships in their life, and then they find success, and all of a sudden they're rich and they're loaded, the big houses in the middle of London, so whatever. But I'm just a normal person, and I went through all this stuff, and I achieved relative success, but I am still, you still see me walking down the street, and nobody will recognize me, and I'm just me. And that was it was to show that even the average person can go through all this stuff and come out the other side where the sun's still shining. And that's the kind of whole point of the book.
Not very much so. It's what I like about it is it's optimistic. You don't spare yourself. You don't. And I think that was important because you're very honest. And was that part of it when you were writing it? You thought, right, okay, I am going to tell these stories about how bad it got, and I was self-harming, and, I did have this inner saboteur, and I kept doing these daft things, to make sure that nothing good would happen. But I think that's really important to put all of that in there. It's important that that's put, because that's your story. That's very much part of what.
And I had to warn my parents about what was coming in the book, and I said that to them. I was like, yeah, there's a few things in here that you're not going to like, and that have happened to me in the past. And that's when I found out, and that's when they said, "Oh, don't be daft. We weren't stupid. We knew that exactly what you were doing." The same with my wife and like my sister, my family, and I had to warn them that there was stuff in here that they might not like, because I had to be honest, not only just with the reader, but I had to be honest with myself as well, because if I was putting that out there, I had to accept my issues for myself before anybody else could accept them. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make total sense. Was there anything that's in there that maybe one thing that you kind of hesitated over, but then put it in anyway? Or did you just think, oh, I've got to do this?
It was more about the self-harm.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want anybody to know that I did that. And I think that's the only thing. No, tell a lie. I wasn't sure about putting the stuff about my marriage in it as well, but when my marriage was like really on the rocks, because nobody really knew that we went to marriage counselling and we went to, we went through all that, and I had to make sure that my wife was okay with me talking about that. Because as I said, like she didn't really speak to her family about me, but she went to my family about me. So there was certain things that were going to come out that not a lot of people knew. But no, apart from that, I am a pretty open book anyway. So there was nothing apart from those two things. Everything else was just I just sat there and it just all came out. Yeah,
yeah, and your wife, as you said, she was very much part of the whole process. She was looking at it, sure it was all okay, and helping you to edit it as well. What do you want people to take away from Big Boys Do Cry? What would you like when somebody sort of finishes it? What would you like them to have learned or experienced or, take with them? What do you think?
It's an old cliche, right? And anybody who's spoken about mental health, I've been a mental health advocate, right? And it's the old cliche of it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It is cheesy, and it is that cliche, but it's true. And that's what's the most important thing is that, and that's what I tried to teach the children when I went into the schools, that no matter what you feel, it is absolutely okay. Because if you weren't supposed to feel it, you wouldn't be feeling it. Like when I used to go into schools, I would say, put your hand up if you've ever had a cold, and they'd all put their hands up. And I would say, do you know why we've all had a cold? It's because we're human and we're supposed to feel like that. It's the same whether you're sad, angry, happy, jealous, no matter what emotion you're feeling, you are supposed to feel it because you are human, and that's what it is. And it took me a long time to accept that no matter what my feelings are, it's okay to feel them. And that's what I would like people to take away is no matter how bad it gets, it's okay to feel like that. Just get through it. It will get better.
That is perfect. And that's exactly what children should be told. They really should. I think we're getting better, Chris. I do think we're getting better. I think there's still a ways to go. Mm-hmm. But at least we're talking about mental health now. What we need now is action, for plans to, it's fine to talk about it and ear problems. Absolutely, of course it is. But then people need help. Like you said, you had therapy. No matter, it might be medication, it might be therapy, it might be whatever suits you, because obviously one size doesn't fit all. But it's really important to get that help and to make that first step, especially for blokes. So, Chris, what about the future? You've got your 4 things you said you wanted to achieve. Being a dad, first of all, which is obviously the most important, best-selling author, a wrestler, and hosting a radio show. You've done all them. So what's next?
So through lockdown, I had this newfound passion for helping people. That was my thing. Right. I loved it. I love helping people. So, and I wanted to get into the charity sector, and I'd applied for a whole bunch of different jobs with a whole bunch of different charities, and I got rejected quite a lot, which the old me wouldn't have dealt with very well. But now I was like, right, okay, I understand that there's thousands of people all vying for these jobs. I just need to get my head down and go. And then this fundraiser job came up with the Archie Foundation, and I'd heard about the Archie Foundation before when I was on the radio, and when they did that, that massive Oor Willie bucket trail a few years ago. It was brilliant.
But wasn't it?
It was. They raised just under £1 million with that.
Right.
It's unbelievable. So yeah, so I went in and I had this interview with them, and I got the job, thankfully. And now that is my full-time job, is helping fundraise to help children who visit Nine Wells Hospital in Dundee. We're just about to open up a brand new children's theatre suite Ward 30 at Ninewells, raised £2 million to get that done. And Lucy's never going to go away, but I can see myself being with Archie for a long time.
Well, it kind of ticks all the boxes for you when you think about it. It's kind of like almost all of the things that you've done have led to this point in your life where you've got all of these different skills that you've learned that you can use to really make a difference, which is fantastic. And there's not many people that can say that about their job, that it makes a difference, that it changes lives, that it has that effect. And that must, that surely that horrible inner saboteur now is quietened, and gone. Like to think, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's still in there in the sense that this is my first proper fundraiser job, my first job working in the third sector, and I think deep down he's going, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to screw this up. It's all right, you're going to make an arse of this, Chris. But I can control him better now, and I don't. And as much as I'm kind of personalising this feeling, I don't listen to what that part of me's got to say. Because right now I'm working on a win your wedding competition where couples raise like money for Archie, and the couple who raises the most money wins their wedding. Something that the Archie Foundation has never done.
No, I don't think anybody's done that. I think that's a brilliant idea. Fantastic.
So it's great. I love it. It's honestly, as much as all the different things that I've done in my life, this is without a doubt the best job I've ever had.
Oh, that's great. That's so good to know. It really is. Do you know what, Chris? It's been a joy talking to you. It really has. Thank you for everything that you are doing and that you have done. Like you said, the Lucy books, Lucy Blue Day is going to be around a lot, and I can see it getting definitely getting a resurgence during this year and the next. And then Boys Do Cry is out too. So it's all happening.
Oh, wow. Listen, I'm going to say thank you to you as well for taking the time to do this for me. I know that I can be a bit of a pain in the arse at times when it comes to, and it kind of all comes full circle because you're on the receiving end of me making stuff happen.
Exactly. No, I always like to hear from you. Don't be daft. It's good, and it's been an absolute joy to talk to you. And good luck with everything that you're doing, and good luck in the future. And thank you. Just keep doing what you do.
I do want to say a massive thank you to Lorraine for taking the time out and actually talking to me today. It was an amazing chat. It was great to catch up with her and get my story out there as well. Hopefully you enjoyed that as well. If you did, please tell your friends, tell your family, post it on social media. Just let people know that the podcast is here. And join me next week for episode 4 of the Peer Project podcast with wrestling referee, AEW referee Aubrey Edwards. I promise she'll be on next week, and I'm working on some other really cool stuff as well. Thank you very much for joining us again. Have a good one, and I'll see you soon. Bye.